Okay, should we get started? All right, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jen, and I started Renco about a year ago because this is exactly the kind of community that I would have wanted when I moved here about 7 years ago. And for those of you who don't know my background, some of you have read the generalist guide that I posted on Medium about my experience trying to get into startups when I first moved here. But my background's in political theory and international development. And I spent almost 10 years back and forth in Asia before joining the World Bank. And then I was in energy consulting in DC. And when I moved to the Bay Area, I couldn't find a job in startups, even though I think that, like most of you, I would consider myself a resourceful problem solver and a great writer with like lots of relevant skills for startups. Um, but what finally unlocked opportunities for me was the people I met. So, like, my process for getting connected to the right people and learning about opportunities and trying to figure out how I would fit into the tech ecosystem was really haphazard and drawn out over like many years, where I spent a lot of time building relationships. I worked on projects. I got referrals and introductions. And then I built a personal brand for myself by starting a robotics and AI community for founders. And I hosted events once a month. But this literally took me like four and a half years. And what I realized in the process is that like you will get connected to the best opportunities through the best people networks. And it's just like much like any other industry. And so what Renco is at its core is an amazing people network. It's a very highly curated people network, and it's definitely the most collaborative community that I've been a part of. So, for example, right before this open house, we had our weekly on blocker session. So, like, Amit was there, Maggie was there, Nadia, and that's when we get together once a week to just chat about things that people are blocked on, like personally or professionally. And then as a group, we like try to help each other solve our problems. And that's just like one of the things we do to collaborate. Um, but over the past year, it's just been really fun to watch this community evolve into what is now today like one part social club and one part professional network. And I mean, by social club, there are people who get together to like go on hikes. I just went on a walk with a member who lives up the street from me. Um, I've gone on bike rides with people here, and people are meeting up to do other activities wherever they are in the world. And it's not just Bay Area based. And yeah, so we have members from all over the world right now. I think it's like 13 different cities in 4 different countries. And everybody helps each other navigate their careers in all kinds of ways, which means like people will share with the community interesting opportunities that come through their networks. We help each other with mock interviews. We write blog posts together. There's like groups that are working on new startup ideas together. There's an angel investing channel. So I think that whatever stage you are in your career, it's a really good opportunity to be part of a real community of people who all identify as strong generalists. Um, Before I introduce the members who are going to speak today, I just wanted to stress one more thing, and that's that we are building this community in service of us because we think it should exist in the world. And all of the members of Renco work together to co-create a community that we're proud of. We get a lot of questions about the business model of Renaissance Collective, and so I just wanted to be proactive about addressing that up front. We do not have a business model behind our community. And although we're not opposed to building a business around some aspect of Renco, if it helps us serve members better in the future, we haven't found something that fits that standard today. And it's just not important to what we're trying to accomplish. I could say a lot more about Renaissance Collective, but I just want to give everyone a chance to meet our members and get some of your questions answered. So as members introduce themselves, feel free to put your questions for me or for them in the chat window, and we're going to be going through and answering all of those. So we'll introduce members one at a time, hear about their experience, and then do question and answer after all the panelists have had a chance to speak. So I'd love to introduce Nadia, who is one of our founding members at Renco. She's contributed to building this community in so many ways, and she's been a part of the brain trust of Renco since she joined. In her day job, she's a product manager at Lyft, where she's working on building new products for transit, bike, and scooter, and she was a founding member of the bikes and scooters team. Nadia made the transition from product to product from product marketing. And that's something that I know a lot of generalists. We were just talking to Maggie. She wants to make the transition to product. So Nadia has shared her experience on how she did that in one of our Renco blog posts. Before working in tech, Nadia thought she wanted to be a politician and a lawyer. So she worked as a paralegal and at several nonprofits. She's really passionate about having a positive impact in the world. And in her free time, she makes desserts, and she's a huge bookworm. I get a lot of my reading recommendations from Nadia. Fun fact, Nadia's half German, half Middle Eastern, and she's the first person in her family to graduate college in the US. Nadia, tell us about why you joined Renco and what your experience has been.
That was like the most awesome intro. Thank you, Jen. It's super awesome to meet everyone and like see so many new faces. Like Jen mentioned, I found Renco, I guess it's a little bit under a year ago. And I would say like my sort of journey to it was like very much sort of a combination of just like luck and sort of life intervening. And I'm like really glad that it did. I work on transit, and I was on my commute home, and I saw a post that Jen had shared about sort of smart generalists in a Facebook group. I clicked it, and it just was like one of those things where it was an early version, but like how she talked about like what a smart generalist is and sort of her goals for the community and just bringing people together really resonated with me. And I just was like, I don't know what this is, but I'm excited about it and want to learn more. So I actually ended up applying pretty much on the spot. It was a different process sort of back then. And I remember going through some of our essay questions, some of which you would encounter now, and just finding them really captivating. You know, there's things like thinking about controversial issues and taking arguments from different sides. And I remember just having a lot of fun just going through that application process. And I sort of was like in a rush trying to catch my bus, but ended up really enjoying the process, both of applying and then of getting to know sort of Jen and the community members at the time, and just really being sort of dazzled by how sort of brilliant, unique, kind, curious every single person was. And I think as we've grown, it's only been more so. I sort of work in tech and I'm in San Francisco now, but I think just being exposed to so many different perspectives, so many different, you know, career journeys, life journeys has just been like a really awesome experience. So as Jen mentioned, I came from the Unblocker session where Amit and Maggie and everyone was just giving me really great advice about like how to sort of get unstuck on something. And so I would say like my sort of one-liner to end the intro of like, what do I love about Renco is really the people and how we interact. And I think it's a really sort of unique space where it's not purely professional, it's not purely social, but you just get to engage with like really bright, really thoughtful, really sort of generous, curious people. So that's my intro. Super stoked to answer questions and get to know you all better too.
Awesome. Thank you, Nadia. So glad you joined the community. Nadia brings so much energy like every day to the community. And the application, when you go through it, she definitely has her fingerprint on some of the questions. So there's more interesting questions on it because of Nadia. Next, I'd like to introduce Gavin. Gavin also joined us about a year ago. And when he joined, he was working in a 20,000 person factory in Vietnam. And he wanted to transition from apparel supply chain and product development into tech. Since joining Renco, Gavin has pivoted into a biotech startup after exploring lots of different opportunities. And it's been really fun to be supportive of him as he's gone through that journey. Gavin brings tremendous positive energy to the community, and we can always count on him to help other members. After we have gone through like mock case interviews with him, he's helped other people go through interviews. He also shares his hobbies with the community, and those include collecting vinyls, dancing, photography, and most recently in quarantine, he's been making a lot of bread and pickling and fermenting. So we'll get pictures of like Gavin's culinary creations in our self-quarantine cooking channel quite a bit. Gavin, what's up?
Hey, like Nadia said, I think if Jen didn't start Renko, she could have had an alternative career as a professional hype person. Because she just, kills it, hyping it up. I think she could speak about me much better and eloquently than I could ever do so myself. So a little bit kind of on why I joined Renko. Like Nadia previously said, it was just one of those kind of circumstantial things. And I think the important thing about Renko is the value of people network. So it just so happened I was about to pivot and move out of Vietnam, move out of Asia, and do some extended traveling when, a family friend of mine, he happened to be a VC and a good friend of Jen. He just let me know he knew about my situation and connected Jen and myself, and then the rest is history, so to speak. And, at doing that application process, I was like, damn, I haven't written an essay since the end of university. I was like, this is the most stimulating. I forgot how to write properly and form an argument. I think that was one of the most stimulating things ever. And, I dedicated like 6 hours of my time, like crunching through. And it was definitely worth it. Somehow I eked by Henry's very rigorous standards. And I think the thing that I really value about Renko is that it's not very ego driven. It's a sounding board ultimately. Like I've posted plenty of dumb thoughts, bad writing, bad email intros, and I've never felt ashamed of what I've put out there. Everyone has given just the most positive, constructive advice, and as a result, it creates this kind of like virtuous signal and positive feedback loop where you yourself are incentivized to give back and to kind of build that kind of energy in. And it's been very rewarding being a part of like the new member subcommittee and trying to give back and formalize kind of the processes on how we can welcome new members to the team. It's like a 70 plus member community now, and it's crazy how fast 1 year has grown. And it's just been a blast. And I mean, I would say I'm the great demonstration of it's the value of people networks, knowing the right people, building mutually beneficial relationships. That's how you pivot into your next dream job, your next industry move, and your next lasting personal relationship. So.
Thank you, Gavin. That was really helpful. I want to introduce Charles, who is one of the most generous people you will ever meet in terms of sharing his knowledge with the community. Charles is the person who posts the most interesting articles in our Slack group, and he always has hot takes on articles that other people share. I think we all learn a ton from Charles on our Slack, like every day. And Charles challenges our thinking. He's really good at debate. So good luck debating with Charles. But it's not like getting trolled on Twitter. It's a really collaborative and kind group. And Charles is there to help you learn. A couple weeks ago, Charles organized a personal finance workshop for Renko, where we talked about investing and the effectiveness of different robo-investing platforms versus index funds. Everybody really enjoyed that. It was a topic that we had hotly debated on Slack. And so we were like, okay, let's just take this off Slack. Charles, lead the group. And it was really good. Charles is currently working in ops at Mindstrong, and he was previously at Uber and Morgan Stanley. He's joining us from New York City, and in his spare time, he likes to read about finance, tech, and econ. He hangs out on Twitter a lot, and he rides his bike and hikes. Charles, tell us about why you joined Renko and what your experience has been.
Oh boy, thank you, Jen. That's yeah. I second the hype career that she could have had otherwise. I think you should introduce me for most things I do in my life. Anyway, so I joined Renko, I think either late December or early January. So I've been here about 7 months, seen it grow from maybe 20, 25 people to where we are today. What drew me there? I, like many people, was looking to build out my network and was looking for a new job. And I came across Renko as, as it was labeled as a place to connect generalists in tech with companies. So that's kind of what initially drew me. I also had a friend who joined, not on this call, Mishti, who was one of the even earlier members. So joined with that lens, thinking, it'd be a good place to just kind of build a network. I know a lot of people in lots of different Slack groups, whether it's, sector related or just, random Slack groups. And so I thought it'd be more like that, right? Where it's kind of like you just post occasionally and you get something out of it, but not much. But, I was really surprised by a lot of the things that folks on this call are saying. It's really like the first place I go when I read something interesting to post. It's not just about, finding a job or something like that. I found a job and I'm still actively involved, right? So I think that's one question that probably most people have on the outside. But yeah, it's just been, one of the few places where it's a really just interesting group of people. I think we've done a pretty good job of getting folks that I probably would never have interacted with because it's from lots of different parts of tech, lots of different roles. So, we have people in product, we have people in ops, we have people in design. So it's a really interesting group where, it's not just, I worked at Uber. So most of the people there are like pretty similar in terms of my network. So that's been really awesome. And then as Jen noted, just, it's one of the most collaborative places I've been. So I'll give an example is, I spent a little while looking for a job, probably too long, but, I had a bunch of case studies, right? And, you had people in Renko never met, just willing to spend, 45 minutes with me going over a case. You have, we had someone named, in the group, Matt, post the other day, he had a case and you immediately had, 20 comments offering to help, right? So it's kind of weird, like in a community where, no one's paying anything. No one's like, I haven't met like 95% of the people here. I've actually never met Jen in person, being we're on different coasts. So yeah, it's just a really, really special and interesting place to be. So I think one of the great things that Renko does, it sounds like I'm talking about a lot of social features and things like that, but it really is like one of the best places to learn about new companies. We get really great speakers as well. I hosted a talk with someone at Google X, which was really interesting. Going from the beginning, he worked at Waymo at the very beginning. So just thinking about the process of like how you come up with that kind of business and how you evaluate opportunities at Google X. And yeah, I could probably go on and on, but I think happy to answer more questions. But, as I mentioned, I've been really happy with making my decision to join.
Cool. Let's see, we have a couple questions. Let me pull them up. Shen, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Jen, and thanks everyone for introducing. My question is around just like the overall life cycle of members. Just want to see like if this is like a lifelong commitment, like do people graduate? How long do people stay active? Just want to see like, how long, like, usually like how long people stay at Renko.
Yeah, totally. I think you'll hear more from Henry on admissions, but so at first when we had started this, and it was about connecting generalists with opportunities in tech, especially like early stage startups that need this like all-rounder, great problem solver. I would call people up after they got jobs through the community or otherwise, and I'd be like, hey, do you want to graduate? I'll send you a cupcake and we can celebrate you. And actually, like, every single one of them was like, no, I don't want to graduate. Just because I got a job doesn't mean that I don't want to keep growing my network of people. And I'm really loving the Slack and I love the events. And nobody actually wanted to leave the community. So right now, I mean, it could evolve if we get so big it's like unruly or something. Maybe we'll change things, but right now everybody, there's no minimum of what we expect in terms of engagement. People are just engaged. Like, people love chatting with each other. So, and they love coming to events, or they love organizing their own events. People start their own clubs. It's kind of like being back in college, and you're like, hey, I'm really interested in angel investing. Does anybody want to, start a Slack channel? A couple of days ago, somebody started a creatives channel to hold each other accountable in their personal writing projects, and they read and edit each other's writing, which is amazing because we have such great writers in the community. That's literally the curation for the community, is writing. So that just started. People are working on startups together. There's just all kinds of things going on. So it's like really up to you how much you want to put into it. And then there's people like, sometimes life happens. We had a member who was super, super engaged, and she was leading our events subcommittee, but her dad just passed away. And so she had to go home, and she's taking some time off, but she like misses us. We sent her a card, that we all signed, and wrote her notes. So it's a community that's here for you when you want it. There's like no life cycle. Let's see. Gabby had a question.
Hi, everyone. Nice to virtually meet you all. My name's Gabby. I think I am the youngest person in this call. I'm still in school, so I know the feeling of like being in those clubs like you were talking about, Jen. But my question is, I'm kind of wondering what the demographics of Renco looks like in terms of people who are job seeking, or people who are very comfortable in what they're doing but are just looking to meet new people, and kind of like what that landscape looks like.
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually think that right now we have more people who already have jobs than are seeking jobs. I don't know, Henry, what do you think? What's your impression? Henry leads admissions.
Yeah, we haven't actively tracked this specific metric. I have a general sense that Jen is right. Probably more folks who are fairly established. And I think at the very beginning of Renco's inception, we were branding ourselves more so as a community for folks who are in job transitions. And so that was more of the makeup. But we've since rethought what the purpose of Renco is, and now it's more branded as a community for folks to come together both on a social and a professional basis. And so I think now we mostly get folks that are a bit more established in their careers, but we've had folks who've been in a job and then transitioned while they've been part of the Renco community, and that's been, I think, very helpful to those individuals. So hopefully that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, and also for people who are transitioning jobs, we also get a fair number of people who are transitioning industries. So, for instance, we have a former Olympic figure skater. She was, she was making a transition. We have a doctor, several lawyers. One of the lawyers who just joined us has like clerked for the Ninth Circuit. There's just a bunch of people from different professions who are making that transition and exploring opportunities in tech. And some people like Amit, Amit's on the call. He was like trying to decide between tech and politics and ended up going politics for this election. He's working on leading digital for New Hampshire right now for the Biden campaign. But, it started out more tech focused. It started out more job transition focused, but it's changed over time.
I would just very quickly like +1 and say like sort of no matter where you are in terms of like looking or like sort of being happy where you are, like one value add that I found is just being able to like look sort of like laterally, diagonally, like 3 steps ahead. And like because you have people that are at different stages of their careers in different industries, like seeing just sort of how did they get to where they are, like what do they love about it, what do they not love about it. So like for me, for product, there are folks that sort of have been where I am now but have taken very, very different directions. And so it's really cool to sort of be able to reach out and like just get to understand, like, how did they get to where they are? Like, how are they thinking about where they're going? And so I think it's helpful whether or not you're sort of like actively in a transition moment, because you get to engage with people that are like, you know, sideways of you, ahead of you, you know, behind, like all over the place. And it is really, really cool to see that. And I feel like I don't necessarily get to see that sort of day to day at work. So I think that's something that's sort of really unique about it.
I think also, like, to the point of like being a community of generalists as well, like the nature of the sort of people that are in their group is that it is not going to stay in one industry. And so a lot of people are sort of like moving around in different places. I think that like as technology touches more things as well, people are starting to kind of branch off into different areas. And it's definitely made the group really interesting and really engaging, because it's sort of now there's a lot more culture around, like if you have a question on anything, it is likely that someone on Slack has an answer or an interesting story or an interesting perspective, which I've found incredibly valuable as I've sort of like moved between things, even though it started around tech.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, lots of hot takes.
Yeah, lots of hot takes. And for instance, we had an architect from Harvard join us, and he is interested in exploring how office space is going to change. And he's looking at like sort of the virtual meeting rooms and gathering places and whatnot. And we've been looking at houses personally. My husband and I have been looking at houses, and then I pinged him, and he sent me a bunch of architect friends recommendations for people who work in the Bay Area to do some walkthroughs with me. So literally any question that you want to have answered, having that community of generalists together is just like wonderful for learning. Erin has a question.
Yeah, so I actually have to leave in a minute, so apologies on that. But I think my question was just, it's okay. My question was really just about, awesome that you have an active Slack channel. I love that. I love Slack. What other kind of stuff do you guys do? And is it organic, or is there some schedules? You mentioned a committee.
Yeah, we usually have 3 or 4 events a week. It's getting to be a lot, but it's organic. People will plan events. Tomorrow we have something called Operators You Should Know. And one of our members, Andrew Wu, will be interviewed by another member. Andrew was the former VP of Ops at Trip Actions. And he was also the VP of Growth there. He was head of growth at Apartment List. So he's going to share how he navigated to those roles as he perceives himself to be a generalist. And then next week we have Bree Wolfson, who started Strike Press for the Operators You Should Know series as well. We also have a series called like Ask an Expert, and that's for like people who are like execs in the field who have been like, you know, in tech for several decades. And, you know, we had the COO of Masterclass come speak, and we just all asked him questions. It was off the record because he shared a lot of things that were confidential to the company, and it was really fun for us. We also have Teach Me's, which happen once a month, and it's when 6 of our members get together and they teach us something for 5 minutes each, and we all ask them questions. Some of you have been to the Teach Me's, but they're really fun. We like last time, I don't know, Kate's not on the call, but she talked about like working on volunteering for a suicide hotline. Somebody demonstrated how to surf. He had his little brother in the background on a surfboard. There's just like lots of events that are member organized, and then we have our weeklies and our monthlies. So if like, I know Digital Health is a sub channel, and they're planning their first event for the rest of us. So it really depends on like how many people are excited to do things, but the cadence has been about 3 or 4 events a week. Erin, thank you for the question. And I know you have to leave soon, so thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah.
All right. Assad had a question.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for hosting this, Jen. And I think Amit might have touched on this a little bit earlier, but kind of an odd question given that this is aimed at journalists, but wondering, within the current kind of makeup and demographic, what's kind of the industry dispersion and maybe even geographical? I know a lot of stuff is virtual, but is interested in kind of how that falls the way it's currently built.
I think Henry has been tracking stats more than anybody else here.
Yeah, so I'll answer the second question first on geography. We are primarily concentrated in the east and west coast of the US, so a fairly good contingent in SF, and then a decent contingent growing down in New York, Charles being the first one. In terms of beyond that, we're in about a dozen cities around the world. Our footprint beyond the US includes Canada, the UK, France, as well as China. And obviously it's not a limiting factor. We'd love to bring in more folks from more geographies. When it comes to industry, I think we're also pretty widely represented. Obviously, a lot of folks are interested in tech startups, and so there's a wide number of us in that community. Larger tech companies as well, more traditional industries, so finance, consulting, but it's really the whole gamut, and then a couple of folks in like politics related positions. I'm sure Jen has maybe some more to add. I'm probably missing out on a few industries here.
Architecture, law, medicine, sports, finance for sure, finance, consulting, yeah, all kinds of backgrounds of people who have found their way to tech. And I think that we have grown a lot internationally as a community, especially during times of COVID. We haven't done any like formal recruiting or anything, so it's just been word of mouth. And so we somehow got a pocket of Canadians, maybe thanks to Henry and his friends from Calgary. But now we have a couple people in France and a couple people in London, a woman in Kenya. Yeah, all over. Let me see, who else? Deanna.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for sharing your experiences so far. I was curious, it seems like the group is really active and really intimate and growing really quickly. And I'm sure the culture will change as a result of that. So I'm curious if y'all have thought about how to maintain this, this intimacy that you have going.
That's a really great question, and one that Charles has thought about a lot.
Well, I think it's still an open question because we've never, it's very new, and I think yeah, it's something I've been talking about with Jen a lot because it's easy to keep admitting really great people, and then suddenly you have like 500 people, and you can't really have a Slack channel and manage an organization that way. So I think we're still figuring out the right way. I mean, for now, it's just focused on growing slowly and seeing when things break, and like if things get too big, then realizing that way. Not ideal, but I think that's kind of how we're operating. And for now, I think in some ways it's different from when it was 20 or 30 people. But I don't feel like we've hit the point where like we have to change how things operate with how many people we have. I do not know as many people here and there. I'll see a new name and I'll be like, must have joined recently and I missed it. So we're kind of at that scale, but we're not at the scale of, running into those kinds of problems. But look, ideas are welcome. I think that's the other cool thing about here is like, Jen leads and does a great job, but also lets us kind of take initiative on things. So we were debating this recently is like, what's the best way to grow a community? What kind of model should we take? Should we think about, graduating, which we never have? Should we ever think about cohorts? Like we thought about a lot of this, and it's still an open question.
Yeah, we just started cohorts 2 months ago, and 3 months ago. We'll be welcoming our third cohort at the end of this month. But we started cohorting people into monthly cohorts so that when you enter, it feels like you're entering with a class So kind of like when you start your freshman year, and we like assigned each cohort a batch buddy, who acts as sort of like your RA would in college, and make sure you get through the onboarding, plans your first event or field trip sort of thing. So we are trying to have people who have been in the community longer model the culture and bring people into the culture. We also have like a handbook for onboarding. We have an onboarding committee because we felt that was so important to getting people, comfortable with the culture of Renko, which is very open, very vulnerable, and also like high trust. Like we trust people. I think somebody asked a question about confidentiality, Taylor, and the sensitive nature of job seeking. We realized that very early on, and so people, it's like, it doesn't really even need to be said that things are confidential in the community. It's a private community. We don't have any obligation to anybody to grow at a certain rate or let in people that we don't think are a good fit. We don't have growth targets we're trying to hit. Everyone we let in, is someone that we feel like already embodies like of the value of collaboration, generosity, and trustworthiness. So and then in the community we all model that. Like we give shout outs. Somebody set up a shout out channel. I think that might have been Henry, but that's like a wonderful way, if you're building a community, to reinforce the culture and the behavior that you like. And people give shout outs like, several times a week at least, where they're like, so and so helped me, and this is what was really helpful. And then that reinforces for everyone else what it means to be a good member of the community. Let's see. Megan.
Thanks, Jen. You actually really answered one of the major thrusts of my question, which was about how are people onboarded. It seems like a really valuable aspect of the community is sort of being able to figure out who has a story or a narrative that connects to a narrative that you're interested in. And so the cohort model is one piece of it. Is there anything else about onboarding that you're interested in sharing?
Yeah, we have like a new member survey that Gavin actually helped set up, and Ayana and a couple other members, Ayana and Dan, I think they took the lead in doing this. But it's a survey that each new member takes, and then the results go into an Airtable, and there you can find people who have similar interests. We also have all the member bios of everyone who's joined previously and what they're interested in, and that helps you find the right person to connect. It's also still small enough of a community that you'll set up a one-on-one with somebody and they'll be like, oh, you should talk to so-and-so. And you'll leave every conversation with like 3 more people you should talk to, given what you're interested in. So there's a little bit of like following the breadcrumbs. And then there's like intentional, like surveys that we've done to match people better. Let's see. Taylor, did I answer your question?
You did, yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a part of the core. It sounds like, so that's really helpful to hear. Yeah,
for sure. Jason.
Great, thanks, Jen, for putting this together. There seems like a lot of ways to get involved with the different events, like the Teach Me events, the Ask Me Anything, or Ask an Expert, etc. And I'm curious, is there like a baseline level of contribution or activity, or even average, like typically that you see, just so that we could, is it typical that you see, say, a member help or co-produce an event like once every quarter, or I don't know, write for the blog once every 6 months or something? I don't know, just something like that. I know it doesn't have to be inorganic, but I'm just curious, like what typically you see in terms of member contributions.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We've discussed this as part of the new growth subcommittee that we just launched, whether there should be expectations or requirements for engagement. Right now, there are not. And I don't think we're going to go in that direction anytime soon because everybody's busy. The only one who's like, whose job Renco is my my job. So, you know, people post on Slack when they find something interesting, or if there's a job in their network that they'd like to share with a group, or they'll chime in. People, we have a help channel, and one of the best ways that people contribute is to you know, go through and answer questions on the help channel, and people do that like very frequently. But then there are some people who don't use Slack as much, and then they'll come to these unblocker sessions. They'll help people in small groups. There are people who like there are a couple members I know who set aside 2 or 3 hours a week during their lunch hours to like intentionally set up one-on-ones with other members. And so I think it just depends on how you prefer to contribute. Wafik and Allison, two of our members, love running ideas jams, which are for people with startup ideas, and they bring together, you know, you were at the last ideas jam, right? And they'll bring together like you know, people to present their ideas in 3 minutes, and then we go into like breakout rooms where you get deep on one of those ideas. So they're really interested in promoting entrepreneurship. So whatever it is that you feel like you really want to do, we're open enough of a group that like we like to like follow the flow of energy. What people have energy for, we'll do more of. So
I would say too, like being involved is like helpful for the group, obviously, but it can also be a good way to like learn and grow yourself. So like one example is I think there's a lot of aspiring writers in our community, and so for them it's like really natural to sort of like gravitate to the blog and content. And if they had sort of started their own newsletter from scratch, like they wouldn't have an audience, but instead they have this like really sort of awesome audience, not just of our members, but also of folks that subscribe to Renko's newsletter. And so it's a really cool way to sort of practice in like a low stakes setting, building some of the skills that like you might be working on. So, you know, for example, if you're interested in like community organizing, like events could be a great fit. If you want to learn how to build organizations, like admissions committee or our sort of newer growth efforts could be a great fit. So it's a really good way too to just learn and sort of practice some of those skills, and to be able to sort of do that in a way that like you might not easily be able to do like totally on your own. So I think it's like super beneficial for the community, but also like really helpful for us as well, like as individuals.
I would say, just jumping in, I think even beyond the more like formal contributions that the average member contributes, I think even if your engagement with is connecting to 1 to 3 different people in the community and just striking up conversation and sharing like your story with their story. And I think more often than not, if you've already been screened by the rigorous, you know, and part of the community, you already embody the culture that the community is trying to do, represent. And so being able to, it's kind of this tacit thing where when you do connect with 1 or 2 members, it's more often than not, you're able to connect with another person, with this other person in a network. More often than not, I've connected with like 3 or 4 different people, and I've made, you know, 4 or 5 different recommendations. Oh, you should talk to so-and-so, or you should do so-and-so. It's just like these very little things that you don't even really consider as like important, but are really super helpful in terms of kind of reinforcing the culture and, you know, making sure everyone feels welcome to and incentivized to contribute to more formal ways.
Great.
Thanks, Gavin. Cassandra, you had a good question.
Hi, everybody. Well, first of all, this sounds like an incredible community. I think, Jen, you should be really proud of yourself for building something with this team here that has probably evolved past what you originally envisioned. So, like, that's super exciting. But in that path, what kind of constructive feedback have you gotten from members, and how have you been surprised in the ways you've adjusted your strategy to guide and build the group?
Oh, wow. That's such a good question and a big question because I get constructive feedback all the time from people. We really have done an amazing job with empowering people to have a voice in this community and be leaders here, which I'm proud of, but it also means I get a lot of feedback. So for instance, I was on a call today with a member. He's part of the most recent cohort, and he was like, the Slack channel can be really overwhelming for a new member. There's just so much, like that until you get used to it. He's like, it's like, I had to turn off notifications, he's like, is there a way, where we can move some of the conversations off Slack or, like document some of the knowledge sharing that happens in threaded conversations elsewhere, and we've been thinking about that. Like we're thinking about starting some way of collecting the insights over, the course of a week that have been generated on the Slack channel somewhere else and like attributing them. But like, that's one of the things we're thinking of, like how, as we grow and have this amazing engaged Slack channel, which we do not want to discourage because people bring their best thinking to the group, how do we keep it from being overwhelming or, distracting for people who are really busy and have really, like crazy jobs or, families and whatnot. So that's one of the most recent things today. The other thing we're thinking about very carefully is how to intentionally grow the community beyond our immediate networks. We're thinking very carefully about this. Diversity and inclusion has been a theme that has come up as we grow. We need to reach out to people beyond our immediate networks. And, maybe that means like recruiting in a way that we've never done before. We've always just like, members have a good experience, they refer their friends, but that is getting us, frankly, more people who look like us, And so if anybody has any thoughts on that, that's something I'm thinking through like right now. And, I'm happy to chat offline about that. But that's something that as we grow is something that we're very aware of. Let's see. Shash.
Yep. So I was just curious, and Jen, you talked about it a little bit towards the beginning of the call, but in terms of sort of the social element of the group, which is obviously really important and exciting, how do you balance that with having, the professional learning and networking events? And then obviously COVID has sort of upended the natural state of things, but post-COVID, how do you typically, or how do you envision seeing social events happening? I know the group is geographically dispersed, but at least within the areas where there are hubs of people, how do you see that playing out?
Does anybody else want to take this? I feel like I've been talking a lot.
I could take it. Hey, Shash. Last time I saw Shash was in a random cafe in Croatia where I came to my left. So
good times.
It's been a while. So I think, for one, I've never been to a Renko event in person, if that means anything. So they're fun. We had them before COVID, but I don't think it's necessary to go. And in terms of like the social versus professional split, I think like a lot of it's kind of like in the middle, right? Like I don't think all of our events, right, for the most part, are like career related, tech related, networking related, right? And some of the banter we get into like often is started by articles about tech or companies or things like that. I think it's more just like we've made friends. Like I've made friends through Renko just by being involved in a way that I think is not as common in other kind of more formal career groups. So I think, post-COVID, we've been doing everything online. And I think honestly, that's all you really need. Like, I think the in-person stuff is fun, but not necessary. But I think when we talk about social, like, I don't want to give the impression that it's like everyone's just like, how's your day going to everyone? Like we do sometimes do that, but like most of the conversation is structured around kind of shared themes of Renko. Though, yes, we actually, now I'm thinking about it, we have a lot of channels that have nothing to do with tech or career or anything. That's just like people sharing. So I don't know if that answers, but
No, that's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, we have a parenting channel for parents out there. We've got outdoors to share tips on. I was just going to ping the outdoors channel to see if anybody had recommendations on Moab, because I really want to go to Moab and go trail running. But the outdoors, like, they're pretty hardcore. We have some people who like really like free diving and ice climbing and, you know, crazy things. I would say, in terms of social activities, what I mean by that is that we do things to help people get to know each other better and trust each other more. So the Teach Me's I would consider to be a social event, you know, where you're teaching something that you're passionate about, or you spent a lot of time like learning, and you're sharing that with the community, not because it's going to help them in any professional way, but because, you know, it helps people get to know you better. And the more you have things like that, the more you build trust within the community. And so when it's a high trust community, people are much more likely to help each other, is what I found. So the social is actually really important to building that trust, for people, you know, to like feel like they know each other as whole people. Otherwise, I think it can feel kind of transactional. Like if you're just here, like, you know, to like find a job and, you know, like it's not like the soul of the community, where we all really just actually care about each other. I want to give Henry time to talk about admissions, the process, because that's really important to our community too. As you guys have heard, that's like our first, you know, measure of are you a good fit for the culture of Renco. Henry has been leading the admissions committee. He has a large part in like putting the whole process together, and so he can tell you much more about it. Just a little bit of background on Henry. He's Canadian, and he's currently the chief of staff at Embark Trucks, which is a self-driving truck company. And he joined Renco as one of the first members after having just moved to the US and having moved to tech from the consulting world. So he very much identified with the idea that a smart generalist could move into a startup role and add a lot of value. Henry is someone I feel so lucky to work with every day. And at Renco, all of us respect him for his intelligence, his fairness, and the rigor that he brings to building and leading the admissions team. And I'm very sure that like a large part of Renco's warm and collaborative culture is due to Henry's contributions to building the community.
Thank you, Jen. That's very flattering. So thanks everyone here for joining us tonight. Try to be respectful of time and summarize the admissions process in 5 minutes. Jen touched upon the philosophy of admissions a bit. We think it's really core to the community because people are core to the community, and admissions is our tool for curating the people that end up joining. A huge part of admissions is the essays that are part of the application. And I wanted to give a brief primer on why essays are important to us before actually explaining the process itself. So firstly, we think that writing and communication is a really key skill that transfers to any generalist role in any organization. It tells us how you structure your thoughts, how you articulate your arguments, and make your decisions. And so we think writing being so important to the generalist toolkit, that's something that we want to be able to assess before a member joins the community. Second, we find that writing helps us get beyond the resume. So we don't just look at somebody's resume. We think that only tells us part of the story, but we also recognize that our members come from a variety of different backgrounds, and we benefit from the diversity of different backgrounds. And so there is no standard litmus test for what needs to be on your resume, but that makes writing all the more important because it allows us to get beyond the bullets in the CV and really know who you are as a person and how you think. That all said, we're not looking for thesis level writing. We're not looking for authors and people who are super eloquent. We're looking for depth of thought and insight into who you are. And so as long as you can communicate clearly in your writing how you think, who you are, and we get a sense that your values resonate with those of the community. That's what we look for in the applications. So talking a bit about the process, our application consists of 4 short essay questions related to your experiences, as well as a 5th longer prompt that allows you to explore the subject matter a bit more and gives you a bit more freedom to tailor that. So once you request the application from Jen, you'll get 1 week to complete it. The admissions are peer reviewed by an admissions subcommittee within the Renaissance Collective, and we recruit members within the community to help engage in this process, which we find is super helpful because once you join the community, a couple of folks in the community already have the context on you and are able to reach out and engage with you right away. Our members are accepted on a rolling basis, so we basically batch all the applications that we get in a certain week, and then the following week we get a panel together to assess those applications. We don't immediately admit the members. If you are successful, we'll sort of group you together in a cohort with other folks who applied in the same month, and you'll be introduced to the group at the end of the month. And we do this just to foster more of a sense of having a cohort, but also to ensure that there's a standardized and solid onboarding process that you get, which might take some time internally to put together. In terms of what we are evaluating for within the essays, this is actually listed explicitly on our application, so we want to be super transparent for exactly what we look for. I'll give the top line of how we evaluate. The first is looking at your experience, but as mentioned previously, this isn't like specifically certain brands in a resume or anything of that sort, but rather what sort of contributions and impact have you made in previous roles. And also we look at your holistic profile. So we care about meaningful volunteer work, side projects, personal hobbies. All of this gets bucketed together under experience, and we're looking for people who are well-rounded and have interesting and diverse skill sets. Secondly, we look at the thoughtfulness of your responses. So we think it's important that people put in the effort to write our essays, and we find that that also translates fairly well to folks who are willing to put the effort into building the community once they join. And so that's what we assess there. Third, we look for the clarity of expression. And so are you able to articulate yourself well? Are you able to communicate your experiences as well as your arguments for a certain controversial issue essay that we have in the application. Fourth, we look at the motive to join. So like, do you understand the value of Renco? And I think everyone who is on this call probably has learned enough about Renco to really understand that we are community first. We are 1 part social, 1 part professional, and just being able to articulate that this is the type of community that you're looking for and is what we assess there. And the 5th component is value add back to the community. And so at the end of the day, one of the core themes of Renco members is that all Renco members are quite generous. They're willing to give back to the community. They're willing to share their personal experiences, to share Renco with their personal networks, to stay engaged in the community and to meet new members. So we really look for people who are willing and happy to give back to the community and to contribute in any way that they see fit. And so we tried to assess that a bit in the application just by asking how you've contributed to other communities and how you generally, what's your general orientation towards contributing to Renco. So it might seem a bit intimidating at first, but there's really no guidance for how long this should take you. Some members can finish it in an hour or 2. Others will take a bit longer to get their thoughts together. But at the end of the day, we're just trying to assess who you are and whether your values really fit well with that of the community. The easiest way to apply, head to the website, complete an interest form, and from there, Jen or another member will reach out and essentially provide you with the instructions, and you can choose when you start the clock on your application. Once you decide that you want to start the clock, we'll send you the application and you'll have a week to complete it. So to conclude, we encourage you to apply if anything that you heard today or that you've read about our community sounds interesting. We obviously appreciate and accept people from all backgrounds and experiences. And that's probably the piece that I find most personally enriching, that every month I get to meet more new interesting people who bring a breadth of different experiences and are able to share new ideas and help me learn and grow as an individual, part of this community. So I'll pause there and hand it back to Jen, but if there are any questions, feel free to ping them or ask them now. I think there's nothing else sort of scheduled for the rest of the session. So.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. We hope that gave you a much better picture of who we are, and we would love to get to know you guys better. So if you do want to apply, you can just bypass the interest form if you want, and you can just reach out to me directly, jen@renaissancecollective.co. I think most of you have my email address. I know a couple of you have already applied. We're sorry if it's taking a long time, but all the applications are read by 3 members. So that process does take a little while. Please be patient with us. And we're also welcoming a new cohort by the end of this week. So admissions is always very, very busy. But I know that everyone is very thoughtful in reading application essays, and they really do want to get to know you better. So thank you so much, and feel free to reach out to me with any questions. I'm always happy to chat. All right, take care, guys. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.